I was born in East Vancouver. My parents and grandparents were East Vancouver, which was the original sort of working class area of the city. And it's now gone way upscale with all the house prices and such. But I, my father was a shop steward, and my grandparents were kind of, left wing, either communist or hardcore socialist and such. So that's sort of a bit of background. Norwegian mother, so also very steeped in Protestant religion too. So, but then I was getting involved in skiing, and I ended up breaking my neck in a skiing accident when I just turned 19. So I ended up quadriplegic, in the hospital for over a year, and the total change of life trajectory, and that really did ended up on social housing and welfare and all these things. I had a real tragic kind of reckoning of where I was going with my life. I got very suicidal, and eventually went through this process of uh, figuring out, is life worth living, or that kind of thing, and ended up saying, yeah, actually, I essentially killed myself figuratively, and then realized, oh, I guess I have no assumptions, no expectations of life. So I killed the old Sam, and I ended up being this new guy. And I still think of him in a third person way, Sam before this injury. And so then I thought, okay, well, it's a new life. Let me see what I can get out of this. And so I ended up wanting to, okay, what am I going to do with my life? Well, what did I used to do before my injury? Ah, maybe that gives me a good clue. So I ended up doing sailing, creating a sailing program and hiking program and music program, all the stuff that I loved doing before my injury, and ended up creating all of these agencies, and so other people could do it. And I also wanted to be a kind of an entrepreneur. And so creating all of these organizations were getting my entrepreneurial bug dealt with. And so it ended up all these great groups that were formed. Basically, I just got a bunch of other people doing all the work, and I took all the credit. And so now, 30 years after I left them, they're still going strong and producing a lot of really wonderful experiences for people. And I ended up with the Order of Canada, and but that also gave me a bit of awareness, and people were aware of me, and I was always bumping up against municipal bylaws, and I was thinking, why does that exist, and why can't we change that, and whatever, and that sort of got me interested in politics, and ended up volunteering, and then somehow somebody said you should run, and so I did, and I won, so I became a city councillor, and 12 years later, some weird rip in the universe happened, and I ended up mayor of the city. So that was quite a, unexpected thing. Well, as a mayor, my proudest thing was I kept our caucus voting as a block. So that was, I spent almost all my energy trying to keep us together. We only had 6 votes, and if I lost one person, I would no longer be the mayor, basically. So I kind of think of myself, I love Steve Nash in the way he plays basketball, and he's never really the hero, or he always sets other people up. He finds good players that can do things and passes the ball to them. And, because so few people do that, everybody wants to, is sort of consumed by ego. So I always thought that I tried to, present the wonderful bureaucrats, that were so smart and way smarter than me. and had thought about things much deeper than I had. And so I always tried to block for them in a way. And like I try to identify who was the real star. There's so many things. I mean, the Olympics and that, would not have happened. I think I was in there, nudging or putting my thumb on the scale when I saw the necessity. And so I don't think there's any great achievement, no building. I could show a lot of buildings that wouldn't have happened without me there, but I was just part of the thing. With the nonprofit groups where we actually created a sailing program and designed a sailboat that could be sailed even by people with no arm function, just using their sip and puff device. That was something I pushed hard for, that everybody, all disabilities, could sail the boat that we were going to create. So there you get immediate benefit. You can watch your boat gets created, designed, the program gets built, and there are all these very disabled people coming down and going sailing, and racing and things like that. So you get a real charge from that. It's very much more, uh, compressed time from what you do and getting it going versus politics. Often it's, generational things that you're doing, or many, many years that it takes to get things, and you're just one of the many people. And I always thought of myself as kind of a handmaiden for other people's dreams, like at the last moment, all these people would work hard on their projects, and I would just, at the last minute put my hand up. And if we got 6 votes, it went forward, that was kind of nice to see all the work that people put into things, and we validated it. And it wouldn't have happened if we didn't make that final decision. But it was their project. I never really felt that that was my thing. So in a way, I guess you're just overseeing everybody else's projects. I think it's really important to have a perspective of the world and to see how seriously different Canada is from so many other countries, and how similar it is to the Anglosphere countries. Australia, New Zealand, Canada, the US, Britain. Those are very specific cultures that have created uh, some of the most successful, prosperous, free, just, fair countries in the world. And that it's a real mistake to just see what's in front of your nose. And why is it that there is this, of all the hundreds of armed conflicts that are going on at this day in the world, none of them happen in the Anglosphere. How is it that all of our incomes, the average incomes, are so high? The social infrastructure, the institutions are so strong. We can withstand crazy, crazy people, getting into government, and they're pretty darn uncorrupt, system. I mean, it's just stunning that I could go through all my time in politics and never really see corruption. Like, I think we're, corruption in the sense of people making, something from themselves, whatever. I think there's sort of institutional, you could call it corruption or imbalances, but no, it's amazing, the thing that we've achieved here, and it is very different from everywhere else in the world. Just look at the GDP per capita. I mean, this is a pretty measurable thing, and all of the Anglosphere countries are in the 50,000 to $100,000 per year range. All of Sub-Saharan Africa is $1,600 per year. All of the sort of Middle East and Eastern European, you're looking at, $2,000 to $5,000 a year. India is $2,500 a year, average income. Like these are stunning, stunning numbers. And to miss that by, thinking that this is not a special place or the Anglosphere is not a special place, that's a serious mistake. It is a serious problem that we don't understand the Glorious Revolution. This was everything goes back to the Glorious Revolution when we got the constitutional monarchy, when we got rid of absolute monarchy and we broadened the whole decision-making process, and when we got Enlightenment values. Protestant Christianity was so essential to that whole story. And, the scientific revolution was created by devout Christian Protestants. You look at the background of that. And the Industrial Revolution, every single hero and innovator of the Industrial Revolution was a dissenting Christian. Every single one of them. You can't find one non. This is, I think, staggering, and it's very clear and obvious for anybody who takes an honest look at history. I think so. We have to cherish that and respect it and understand it, and so that's what I think. Well, the Glorious Revolution was really a complete change in the way we approach government and society. It basically uh, put the monarch in his place, but a respected place, and then started to slowly but surely embrace more and more aspects of society. So first, it was only the aristocracy and the wealthier people that ended up having a voice in Parliament and decisions. Parliament means, it doesn't mean the House of Commons, it means all of the different elements, and even the Royal Society and the science, all of those be, got a voice. And first it was more the insiders that were given power, but as society evolved and become more wealthy and more, in educated, more and more elements of society, women, poor people, they all ended up now having a voice. And so it was this evolution, versus all of these other countries that have these bloody revolutions, and they still suffer from the hardness of that. The fact that we have been able to accommodate without violence different points of view, different elements of society, different demographics is such a gift. What an amazing thing that we don't have what other countries, almost every other part of the world has, which is these violence and inability to solve problems through evolution, through reform. One of the most important things of any country is its deep culture. And that deep culture is the product of so much history and all of these, the way society of the time, of the place, dealt with the world. And British Columbia is very interesting because its deepest culture is in the Northwest Company, which was a fur trading company, and ultimately the Hudson's Bay Company, which was the government. It was the government of Western Canada. And it was very, it was non-institutional religious. The Hudson's Bay Company did not allow religious officials in the area up until late 1830s, 1840s, and but very grudgingly. So it's always this idea of kind of a spiritual, non-institutional religion in the West Coast, and that comes straight from fur trading company. Also, the Hudson's Bay Company was full of, especially the leaders, were really decent people and very committed to learning, committed to economic prosperity, and they all married Indigenous women. They all had very open-minded views about life, and we come directly from that. And most British Columbians, when you compare them to other parts of the world, we generally think that our government's doing a good job and they're doing things for us, and we should trust them and give them, our support and whatever. And it's very different from everywhere else in the world. And it comes from this deep culture of the fur trade and the way we started, and the openness to Indigenous people and whatever. That all came from the fur trade and multiculturalism, feeling comfortable with different people. That's very much from the fur trade. So I think it's really important for everybody to understand how we are prisoners of the culture that we grew up in and that is we immersed in. It's like the fish, the old fish and the young fish say, hey, nice water, eh? And the young fish says, what's water, And, so we're so deeply immersed in the culture of the place that we don't even recognize it, that it's different until we go to another place. So nothing better than to go to different cultures and immerse yourself and just see what a precious thing that we have in Canada. The one that seems to be the most quintessential is James Douglas. There he was, part black. He was the first governor of the United Province of British Columbia. He was married to an Aboriginal woman. His kids were Indigenous, and he very much was about fairness and open-mindedness. He really set things up with Indigenous relationships that were positive. Yeah, there was a group of people that wanted to tear down the statue of James Douglas because he represented British Columbia colonialism. And this was during the time when they were tearing down statues, and the staff of Government House said, well, you're going to have to go and talk to the person who put it up. And that was Stephen Point, the first Indigenous Lieutenant Governor of British Columbia. So here was, Indigenous people highly regarded him. He did a tremendous job and set us up in the right way, in a good way for the beginning of the province. So he has to be way up there in the whole panoply of great British Columbians. British Columbia and the Prairie Provinces differ in their history because British Columbia was really the Northwest Company. And the other side of the mountains was mostly the Hudson's Bay Company. And what happened was when they had to merge, they were bitterly fighting and people were killing each other from each of the companies. They had to split them up, and they put all the Northwest Company people out to British Columbia, and all the Hudson's Bay Company people stayed on the east. So our founding culture is Northwest Company. Very entrepreneurial, very much, pragmatic and very open and multicultural. And I think I can see the two different cultures of the British Columbia and the prairies as being caused by these two different fur trade cultures. I have to go back to history in this as well. The Americans were really based on farming, and the Canadians were based on resources. And resource was international, farming was local. The Americans could get away with this revolutionary thing and, very, very localized stuff. Canadians had to always think about trade with international, and they had to have their relations with the other parts of the world, and very, very firmly founded in the glorious revolutionary ideas and scientific industrial revolution, and the generosity and the integrity and the competence of the institutions of British Parliament and the British governmental system. So, and then of course, this whole French element, and the fact that the French could have, the Quebecers could have gone with the Americans, or they could have, they chose to go with the British. And that has been turned out to be good for them. The Americans would have never, their culture would have never lasted in the U.S. They would have been completely, just like all of the north of New York, all that whole area is French, basically, but you wouldn't know it. Nobody speaks French there or anything. So they would have been completely submerged in that. And the British model, which is way more multicultural, the Americans are really English, and the Canadians are British. All of the American colonies were in the 1600s, and they were made as English colonies. That was their foundation. They were from England, and they were, this monocultural English thing. The Canadians are all of the 1700s, when Britain was the dominant idea. So Britain, what is it? It's four different countries all combined together on one identity. So British is more of a constitutional thing than an ethnic thing. And so Canadians are very comfortable with, the not the melting pot, but the mosaic, that we all have our different identities, and yet we're all together under the constitutional monarchy, under the parliamentary institutional system, and we all do well by it. And so I think that really does still define Canada. Well, Canada has been pretty good at integrating people, to this concept of Canadian approach. I mean, I'm mostly Norwegian, and they are very suspicious of Norwegians. They were mostly communist, and it's true. My grandfather did call Joseph Stalin Uncle Joe, but the we did come. Canada has, like, even my Irish background. North American English people were not happy about Irishmen, and so but we got integrated and assimilated, and we, feel a loyalty to Canada and concept. So I think that's the formula. We keep bringing people in, and they keep adding, flavors and colors to the Canadian mosaic. And I think but we still we should really emphasize what was the Glorious Revolution all about? How is it that the British created the modern world? The Industrial Revolution, all of our prosperity is from Britain, from the Industrial Revolution, from the Glorious Revolution, the Scientific Revolution, all part of that. And we have such an amazing heritage that we should really understand it and cherish it and conserve it. That's the part we need to conserve. I think it's important for us to understand history, to remember, to understand what we're trying to conserve, what are the wonderful, amazing parts of our society, because we have achieved something phenomenal. When you look around what the world has and how we live, it's just breathtaking. No one would believe it. I ask people, here's something that I ask them. Would you rather be an average person today, or the wealthiest, strongest, whatever, most important person 200 years ago? absolutely, you'd never want to be that person. If you've got a choice to be a normal person today, way better life than they do. Even 100 years ago, I couldn't imagine how we used to live. You didn't even have, toilets that were, like electricity and things like that. Uh, Travel, medical, the state of medical care, food, we eat better than any emperor ever ate. So we have created something so special and outstanding and just breathtaking that we need to remember that and just look at how people used to live. Even, when I'm thinking about my youth, what we didn't have, you didn't have a phone that you could just access all knowledge in the world? Huh, that's interesting. So I think we need gratitude and a real appreciation of what we have.
Thank you for tuning in to this interview of the One Canada Project. I'm very grateful you're on this journey with me. Don't forget to follow or subscribe depending on your platform, and please give us a like if you enjoyed the interview. Thank you for being with me today.